The woman I built my empire with filed for divorce and wanted 80% of everything I owned. Everyone said she deserved it. But when I traced the missing money, I uncovered a secret so dark it turned the entire case upside down, and exposed the man she betrayed me for. Subscribe, like, comment and watch till the ending to share this interesting story to family and friends. The morning sun streamed through the tall windows of the Cole mansion, glinting off marble floors and polished wood. Ethan Cole sat at the edge of the dining table, sipping his coffee absent-mindedly while scrolling through business emails. His world, though demanding, had always been orderly: deals, contracts, numbers. Predictable. But today felt different. His housekeeper, Maria, approached nervously. "Sir," she said, placing a large white envelope on the table. "Mrs. Cole said to give you this before she left." Ethan glanced at the envelope, thick, sealed, official-looking. The logo of Walker & Myers Legal Associates printed in bold black across the top. His stomach tightened. "Thanks, Maria," he murmured, already sensing the heaviness inside. He tore it open slowly. The words hit like a hammer. Petition for dissolution of marriage, filed by Vanessa Cole. Claiming 80% of marital assets, inclusive of real estate, business equity, vehicles, and personal accounts. Ethan's breath caught. Divorce? 80%? He reread the letter twice, hoping he'd misunderstood. Vanessa, his wife of 7 years, the woman he built everything with, wanted nearly everything he owned. He sat there frozen, staring at the empty chair across from him where she usually sat, scrolling through her phone during breakfast, pretending to listen to him talk about his projects. Suddenly, the silence in the house felt suffocating. His phone buzzed. A text from Vanessa. "You'll hear from my lawyer soon. Don't contact me directly. It's better this way." Better this way? Ethan's hand trembled slightly. He called her immediately, but it went straight to voicemail. He tried again. Nothing. He stood, pacing the living room, his mind spinning. No fights. No infidelity. No drama, at least not from him. Just distance. A growing wall of indifference he tried to ignore. When his lawyer, David Lorne, picked up the phone, Ethan's voice cracked slightly. "David," she filed. "Vanessa. This morning." David's sigh was heavy. "I had a feeling this was coming, Ethan. Her attorney reached out last week to request preliminary statements." "You knew?" Ethan's voice rose. "I couldn't say anything until it was official. Ethan, her demand is outrageous. 80%? That's not a negotiation, it's a declaration of war." Ethan leaned against the wall, chest tightening. "Why, David? What did I do?" "Sometimes people just change," David replied carefully. "But if she's that confident asking for so much, there's something she's not telling us." Ethan's eyes hardened. "Then we'll find out what it is." He hung up, walked into the study, and stared at the framed wedding photo on the shelf, Vanessa in her white gown, smiling up at him with eyes that once felt like home. Now those same eyes stared at him from the letterhead of a legal firm, demanding to tear his life apart. For the first time in years, Ethan felt something he hadn't in a long time: betrayal creeping under his skin. The house felt colder now. Days passed, but Ethan couldn't shake the silence Vanessa left behind. Her closet was half empty, designer dresses gone, her perfume fading from the hallway. Every little absence screamed of something planned long before that envelope ever hit his table. Ethan drove to his office, trying to bury himself in work. His company, Cole Estates, was midway through a multi-million-dollar development project, and distractions weren't a luxury he could afford. Yet even in meetings, his mind kept circling back to Vanessa's demand. 80%. Why 80? During lunch, Ethan's assistant, Clara, walked in hesitantly. "Sir, there's something you should see," she said, sliding a file onto his desk. Inside were copies of recent withdrawals from the company's joint accounts. Large sums, moved quietly over the past few months. Ethan frowned. "These aren't business expenses," he muttered. "No, sir." "And the signatures?" She paused, lowering her voice. "They're Mrs. Cole's initials." Ethan sat back, stunned. Vanessa had been moving money behind his back, little by little, like someone preparing for escape. That evening he drove home early. The house was still. He walked into Vanessa's home office, something he rarely did, and noticed a small USB drive on her desk. Curiosity prickled. He hesitated, then pocketed it. Later that night he inserted it into his laptop. The screen flickered to life with folders labeled innocently: projects, receipts, personal. But one folder stood out: confidential. He clicked. Inside were scanned documents, property transfers, shell company registrations, and one titled VM Holdings, Ownership 80% v. Cole. His heart stopped. She had created a company mirroring his, with the same assets listed under her control. The timing matched the withdrawals Clara mentioned. Suddenly, a memory struck him. A few months ago, Vanessa had insisted they update the company's paperwork. She'd been unusually involved, asking questions she never used to care about. He'd been too trusting to question it. His phone rang. David, his lawyer. Ethan, I've reviewed the filing. She's claiming she co-founded your company. Says most of the assets were bought under her name to avoid taxes. She's painting you as the one hiding funds. Ethan's jaw clenched. She's setting me up, David. She's been preparing this for months. David sighed. If that's true, we need evidence. Real proof. Ethan's eyes drifted back to the screen. I think I just found where to start. He leaned back, anger simmering into something colder. Calculation. For years he'd played fair. But Vanessa had crossed a line no marriage could survive. He closed the laptop and whispered, if she wants a war, she'll get one. But on my terms. Outside, thunder rolled across the dark sky, fitting Ethan thought for the storm that was about to begin. 3 days after finding the USB, Ethan hadn't slept properly. He kept replaying every conversation he'd ever had with Vanessa. Every smile, every subtle question she'd asked about his company's accounts, every moment she'd looked him in the eye and lied. He needed answers. That morning Ethan met Mark Dwyer, a former detective turned private investigator. They met at a quiet diner outside the city, somewhere Vanessa would never think to look. Mark was direct, with a voice like gravel and the kind of face that had seen too much. You want to know what your wife's been doing behind your back, he said, sliding his coffee aside. You're not the first man to ask that question. I don't need to know if she's seeing someone, Ethan said flatly, though the words stung his throat. I need to know how deep this goes. Money, assets, contacts, everything. She's trying to strip me of my company. Mark nodded. Then we start with her movements and communications. You said she travels a lot. Business trips, Ethan replied bitterly. At least that's what she called them. Mark leaned in. Give me a week. I'll tell you who she's really meeting. The week dragged. Ethan threw himself into work, though his focus shattered every time his phone buzzed. He tried to appear normal, especially around staff, but whispers had begun circulating. Some employees noticed how Vanessa's name had quietly vanished from internal documents. Finally, on a Friday evening, Mark called. Got something, he said curtly. Meet me. They met in Mark's office, dimly lit and lined with old case files. Mark opened a folder and spread photos across the desk, grainy surveillance shots of Vanessa in a sleek black dress at an upscale restaurant. Across from her sat a man Ethan recognized instantly, Marcus Hale, his longtime business partner and friend. Ethan stared at the photo, disbelief etched across his face. No. Marcus. Mark nodded grimly. They've been meeting every week. Private dinners, hotel visits, and, he paused, sliding another photo forward, joint bank accounts opened under both their names. Ethan's stomach churned. His wife. His business partner. The two people he trusted most. There's more, Mark continued. That shell company you found on her USB? Marcus is listed as the silent partner. She's not just divorcing you, Ethan, they're building something from your stolen funds. Ethan's breath grew shallow. Every piece was falling into place, the arrogance in her tone, the confidence in her demands. Vanessa wasn't acting alone, she was working with Marcus to destroy him. Mark leaned back, watching Ethan's reaction. You want me to keep digging? Ethan's voice dropped, cold and controlled. No. I'll take it from here. He gathered the photos and tucked them into his briefcase. As he stood, his reflection in the window caught his eye, a man betrayed, broken, but burning with a new kind of resolve. For the first time since that letter arrived, Ethan wasn't just reacting. He was planning. And this time he wouldn't be the one blindsided. The photos haunted Ethan for days. Every glance at Marcus's face, smiling, hand on Vanessa's waist, twisted the knife deeper. But pain quickly turned to purpose. He knew rage wouldn't win this war, patience and precision would. He spent an entire weekend alone in his study, reviewing files, contracts, and account records. The truth was clearer now. Vanessa and Marcus had spent months diverting funds from the company, using false vendor payments and dummy accounts. It was brilliant, subtle, and would have worked if Ethan hadn't found that USB. On Monday morning, Ethan walked into the office with a calm that unnerved his staff. He greeted Marcus as if nothing had changed. Morning, partner, Marcus said with a grin, patting him on the back. Rough weekend? Ethan forced a polite smile. Just paperwork. You know how it is. Marcus chuckled, completely unaware. You worry too much. Let me handle the finance updates this week. Vanessa said she'll stop by later, wants to pick up some personal items. Sure, Ethan said, his tone smooth. Let's give her whatever she needs. When Marcus left, Ethan immediately called his lawyer, David. I have proof, he said quietly. Emails, photos, transaction logs. But I need it bulletproof before we move. David's voice sharpened. Get digital timestamps, bank verification, and any correspondence showing intent. If you can prove they conspired to move assets under false pretenses, they'll lose everything, legally and criminally. Ethan knew exactly how to do that. That evening he met with Mark, the investigator, one last time. Can you get me into Marcus's secure company email? Ethan asked. Mark raised an eyebrow. That's risky even for me. I don't need you to hack anything, Ethan said. Just retrieve the backups from the company server. Everything runs through there anyway. I own the server. Mark smirked. Smart man. By midnight, Ethan was scrolling through hundreds of emails between Vanessa and Marcus. The language was careful, no direct mentions of their affair, but the coordination was obvious. One email stood out. From Marcus Hale to Vanessa Cole. Once the divorce is final, we'll move forward with merging VM holdings under my name. Ethan will fight, but he won't win without proof. You'll get your 80% and I'll secure the rest. Ethan leaned back in his chair, the words burning into his mind. He thinks I have no proof, he muttered. Let's keep it that way. He began forwarding every incriminating email to a secure external account, labeling them chronologically with cross-references to the stolen funds. Then, for the finishing touch, he contacted an old journalist friend, Sophie Adams, who owed him a favor. Sophie, he said calmly, if I hand you something explosive, can you hold it until I give the word? She hesitated. How explosive are we talking? Career-ending, Ethan said. And maybe freedom-saving, mine. By the end of the night, Ethan had built a silent fortress of evidence. Vanessa and Marcus still believed they were winning, that their manipulation was invisible. But what they didn't know was that Ethan had already set the trap. And soon, when they stepped into court with smug smiles, they'd be walking straight into it. The weeks leading up to the court hearing were strangely quiet, the kind of silence that hides a storm. Vanessa had moved out completely now. She stayed in a high-end apartment downtown, the same one Ethan now knew Marcus had rented for her months earlier. She no longer called, no longer pretended to care. All communication came through lawyers and formal letters signed with her neat, detached handwriting. Still, she occasionally showed up at company functions, uninvited but confident. The first time Ethan saw her after the filing, she arrived at a staff charity event, radiant in a red dress, her diamond bracelet glinting under the lights. She smiled like nothing had happened. Ethan, she said smoothly, sipping champagne, you look tired. Is the divorce wearing you down already? Ethan studied her, calm and unreadable. Not at all. I'm just surprised you still have time for parties, considering the paperwork you've been busy with. She tilted her head, feigning innocence. Business never stops. You taught me that. Marcus appeared seconds later, all charm and confidence, placing a casual hand on her back. Evening, partner, he said with an easy grin. Ethan's jaw tightened, but his tone stayed level. Marcus. The three of them stood together for a tense moment, the room buzzing with conversation around them. Only they knew the real war brewing beneath the polite smiles. You'll come around eventually, Vanessa said lightly, as if reading from a script. You'll see this divorce is for the best. Ethan's eyes met hers. Oh, I see it clearly now. Something in his tone made her blink, just for a second, before she regained her composure. Later that night, Ethan sat in his car watching them leave together, laughing as if nothing could touch them. His hands gripped the steering wheel, but not from rage, from focus. He called David, his lawyer. They're too confident, Ethan said. Good, David replied. That's exactly how we want them. Arrogant people walk right into their own undoing. The days that followed were filled with quiet preparation. Ethan reviewed every document, every email, every bank record. The evidence was watertight. But he didn't let anyone know, not even Clara, his assistant. To the outside world he appeared defeated. Rumors began spreading online, that Vanessa would walk away with nearly all of his empire. Social media even painted Ethan as the greedy husband who refused to share. Vanessa's narrative was working perfectly. But that was part of his design. The night before the hearing, Ethan stood alone in his study, looking at the photo from their wedding again, the same one that haunted him weeks ago. He turned it face down. "Tomorrow," he whispered, "it ends." He packed the evidence into a black folder, sealed with legal markings. On top, he placed one final document, a confidential statement from Marcus's offshore bank account, showing every stolen dollar. Outside, thunder rolled again just like that night weeks ago. Ethan looked out the window, calm and unshaken. He wasn't the victim anymore. He was the reckoning waiting in silence. The courtroom buzzed with quiet whispers as reporters, lawyers and curious onlookers filled the benches. Ethan sat beside his attorney, David Lorne, in a dark suit, his expression composed but unreadable. Across the room sat Vanessa, radiant and confident, wearing an ivory blazer that screamed success. Marcus sat just behind her, pretending to be a neutral observer, but Ethan noticed the faint smirk on his face. The judge entered and everyone rose. The air tightened. The case of Vanessa Cole versus Ethan Cole was officially in session. Vanessa's lawyer, Sandra Mills, began her argument smoothly. "Your Honor, my client dedicated 7 years of her life to supporting Mr. Cole's business empire. She handled finances, client relations, and sacrificed her career ambitions. We seek equitable distribution of assets, precisely 80%, as compensation for her contributions." Ethan didn't flinch. He kept his gaze steady, pen tapping silently on the table. Sandra continued, projecting confidence. "Furthermore, we have evidence suggesting Mr. Cole concealed assets through unreported offshore accounts." A murmur rippled through the room. Vanessa's chin lifted proudly. She thought she had already won. Judge Margaret Holmes, stern and seasoned, turned to David. "Mr. Lorne, your response?" David rose slowly, buttoning his jacket. "Your Honor, my client welcomes full transparency. In fact, we appreciate Mrs. Cole's request for financial honesty, because it opens the door to the entire truth." He handed a thick folder to the clerk. "Exhibit A through F," he said calmly. "Proof of embezzlement and fraud, conducted by Mrs. Cole and her associate, Marcus Hale." Vanessa's face paled. "What?" David pressed on. "These documents include financial transfers from Mr. Cole's company into shell accounts under Mrs. Cole's name. We also have server-backed emails confirming that both parties coordinated these transactions with intent to deceive Mr. Cole and the board of directors." The judge frowned. "Are these verified?" David nodded. "Yes, Your Honor. The data was collected from company servers and cross-referenced with bank statements. We also have sworn testimony from the firm's internal auditor, confirming discrepancies that point directly to Mrs. Cole and Mr. Hale." He turned slightly, gesturing toward Marcus, who, conveniently, is seated right behind her. Marcus shifted uncomfortably as the courtroom erupted in whispers. Vanessa's lawyer looked blindsided, flipping through papers she'd never seen before. Vanessa stood abruptly. "This is a lie. He's making it up." David interrupted, calm but cutting. "Then perhaps, Mrs. Cole, you can explain this email?" He projected the email on the courtroom monitor. Vanessa's name appeared clearly. From Vanessa Cole to Marcus Hale. "Once the divorce is finalized, Ethan will have no proof. VM Holdings will be ours." Gasps filled the room. Vanessa sank slowly back into her chair, color draining from her face. Marcus looked frozen. Judge Holmes banged her gavel. "Order. Order in the court." Ethan finally looked up, meeting Vanessa's eyes for the first time in weeks. His expression was calm, not angry, not smug, just, done. David concluded, "Your Honor, not only is Mrs. Cole's claim of 80% baseless, but she and her accomplice have also committed corporate fraud and theft. We motion for immediate dismissal of her claim and recommend criminal investigation." The judge reviewed the evidence silently, her brow furrowing deeper with every page. Finally she looked up. "Motion granted," she said firmly. "Mrs. Cole, you are hereby referred for investigation under Section 42 of the Corporate Fraud Act. This court is adjourned." The gavel hit. The sound echoed through the courtroom like thunder. Vanessa turned to Ethan, eyes wide, voice trembling. "Ethan, please." He rose calmly, collecting his documents. "You should have been honest," he said softly. "You had everything." Then he walked out, leaving her surrounded by lawyers and flashing cameras, her empire of deceit crumbling around her. The media storm hit the next morning like wildfire. Every business headline, gossip blog, and financial outlet carried the same story. Vanessa Cole and Marcus Hale under investigation for corporate fraud and embezzlement. The once glamorous woman who had strutted into court demanding 80% of Ethan's fortune now faced criminal charges, frozen bank accounts, and a reputation in ruins. Ethan watched it all unfold on television from his penthouse office, not with joy but with quiet disbelief. He had won. But victory felt strangely hollow. His lawyer, David, entered holding a folder. The investigators confirmed everything. Marcus wired the last transfer 3 days before the hearing. Vanessa signed it. Ethan nodded slowly. And Marcus? Gone? David replied. He boarded a flight to Dubai last night under a fake name. Interpol's already been alerted. Ethan exhaled, long and tired. So he left her to face it alone. David's expression softened. She chose her side. That evening, rain poured across the city, the kind that drenched everything in silence. Ethan drove home, past flashing lights and news vans outside Vanessa's building. Reporters shouted her name as police escorted her through the lobby, handcuffed and pale. Cameras clicked, voices shouted questions. She didn't answer a single one. Inside her apartment, detectives rifled through papers while Vanessa sat motionless at the dining table, staring blankly at her reflection in a wine glass. The same apartment Marcus had helped her rent was now evidence in a case file. When she was finally released on bail the following day, she called Ethan. He almost didn't answer, but something in him, perhaps closure, made him press accept. Her voice trembled. Ethan, I need to talk to you. He paused. About what? About everything. They met that evening at a quiet cafe far from the city center. Vanessa arrived in a gray coat, hair pulled back, eyes swollen from crying. Gone was the confident woman who had once taunted him across a courtroom. She sat down slowly. You must hate me, she said, voice barely above a whisper. Ethan looked at her, tired but composed. I don't hate you. But I don't recognize you anymore. Tears welled in her eyes. I didn't mean for it to go this far. Marcus said he'd help me, that you were hiding money from me that he could make things right. Then it became something else. Ethan frowned slightly. You believed him more than you believed me. She nodded, ashamed. I was stupid. Angry. My father's debts were drowning me. Marcus offered to pay them off if I helped him. I thought I could fix it before you found out. Ethan leaned back, silent for a moment. You didn't just hurt me, Vanessa. You tried to destroy everything we built. Her tears broke free. I know, she whispered. And I'd undo it all if I could. He studied her face, once beautiful, now haunted. You can't, he said quietly. But maybe you can start again. Somewhere honest. He stood, leaving some cash on the table. As he walked away, she reached out instinctively but stopped herself. He didn't look back. Through the window, Vanessa watched him disappear into the rain. The man she'd betrayed, now the only one who had ever truly loved her. For the first time she realized the truth. She hadn't just lost the money or the marriage. She had lost herself. 6 months later. Spring sunlight spilled through the large windows of Ethan's new office. Smaller than before, simpler but filled with quiet peace. Coal estates had survived the scandal. Projects resumed, investors returned, and his name was cleared completely. The public now saw him not as the greedy husband Vanessa painted him to be, but as the man who had been betrayed and still stood tall. He'd moved into a modest home overlooking the river, far from the mansion that once echoed with Vanessa's laughter and lies. He no longer needed marble floors or chandeliers. Just space to breathe again. That morning David walked in holding a letter. It came from her attorney, he said. Vanessa's been sentenced, 2 years reduced for cooperation. She testified against Marcus, who's still facing extradition. Ethan took the envelope but didn't open it. Is she, all right? David hesitated. She's in a rehabilitation program, financial counseling, community service. They say she's been quiet. Keeps to herself. Ethan nodded. That's good. When David left, Ethan finally opened the letter. Inside was a handwritten note from Vanessa. Ethan, I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I needed you to know something. When I filed for divorce, I wasn't after your money. I was trying to escape a mess I'd created long before you knew. My father's debts, Marcus's threats. I let fear turn me into someone I swore I'd never be. You didn't just save your company. You saved me from the man I'd become. If there's any justice left, it's knowing you're free of me. I'm sorry. Vanessa. Ethan sat there for a long moment, the letter trembling slightly in his hands. The bitterness that once burned inside him had long faded, replaced by something quieter, understanding. He folded the letter neatly and placed it inside his drawer, not as a memory but as a lesson. Later that day he met Clara, his assistant, at the new construction site. She smiled warmly. The team says the new housing project's ahead of schedule. Ethan smiled faintly. Good. Let's keep it that way. As they walked through the site, he paused at a new signboard. Coal Renewal Project, Building Second Chances. Clara glanced at him curiously. That's a new name. Ethan nodded. It felt right. The wind brushed softly across his face as he looked out over the city skyline, a symbol of everything he had rebuilt, not just his business but himself. For the first time in years there was no resentment, no revenge, no grief, just peace. He took a deep breath and whispered to himself, "Some endings aren't about winning, they're about letting go." As he turned to leave, the sun broke through the clouds, washing the site in golden light. Ethan walked forward, not as the man who'd been betrayed, but as the man who'd survived it. And somewhere far away in a quiet correctional center, Vanessa looked up at the same sky, whispering a silent apology to the wind, the one he'd never hear but somehow already forgave. Subscribe, like, comment and share for more interesting stories.